On Friday's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, we're doing a little Who Would You Rather with two of the biggest goaltenders in the game.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You heard the music and you know what time it is. It's time for the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Flip and Steele. This is episode number 17. Thank you for riding with us through this relaunch of the show. We really appreciate it. And thank you for making us your first listen. You know where to find us: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on YouTube. Everywhere you get your content, you can find us. I'm always here alongside my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele Roden, and we are excited for another Friday episode. We'll be taking a look at Friday's mini 4-game board from a DFS and betting perspective. You know we have some big-time bets for y'all. But we're going to start off the show today, Steele. We're going to go back to one of our segments that's done well for us already with a little Who Would You Rather. But today we're going to be looking at two of the biggest goaltending names in the game. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to dive into this conversation. We got some great studs in the crease we want to talk about. And, you know, I have one of them on my team, another one that I wanted to draft but wasn't able to land, unfortunately. But these are two of the biggest names in the crease right now.
Most definitely. And I think we've touched on them sporadically here and there, maybe one more than the other. But let's no more teases here. We're going to take a look at Darcy Kuemper and Sergei Bobrovsky. Two guys who are currently, you know, big reasons why their teams are at the top of their respective conferences in the Colorado Avalanche and Florida Panthers. Two teams with very legitimate Stanley Cup aspirations. And from a fantasy perspective, Steele, these two guys, you know, you could look at it from a couple of different angles, but, you know, who would you rather?
Look, if this was 2 weeks ago, my mind would have been made. It would have been Sergei Bobrovsky. 100%. As of right now, it is still Sergei Bobrovsky, but it gets a little bit closer when I look into the statistics of how both of these goalies are playing right now. Darcy Kuemper, you know, looking at the stats, they're very similar. Bobrovsky's 24-4-3, Kuemper's 24-5-1. Kuemper has Bobrovsky beat in both the save percentage and goals against average, not by much, but he does have him beat, as well as he has 3 shutouts on the season compared to Bobrovsky, who has 1. 2 of those he's won in the last 2 games against the Vegas Golden Knights and the Dallas Stars. So these guys are very, very close in statistics as well as in fantasy. Kemper's in 10th place for fantasy points and Bobrovsky's in 11th place for goalies in fantasy league. So these guys are neck and neck with each other. It's a photo finish between these guys for top 10. And like I said, if this was 2 weeks ago, Bobrovsky 100%. But as of recently, Kemper's game has been absolutely fantastic, while Bobrovsky, in 4 out of the last 5 games, he's led in 4+ goals. So it's a little bit of a struggle recently for Sergei Bobrovsky, but I have to go with the cat in the Florida Panthers crease right there for me.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting look at these two guys because of how good each of these teams are. And I think we have to, you know, make the point that both these goalies have the benefit of playing behind some very solid lineups. So I will throw that out there. Kemper's been set lights out lately. 7-0-1 in his last 8. 956 save percentage, and you mentioned the 2 shutouts, which obviously help. But 2 shutouts against 2 good Western Conference teams. From where I'm looking at this deal, and I mentioned it to you off air, is I think what's important to note here is obviously down the stretch, you can't go wrong with either of these guys. If somehow you can manage to acquire one of these guys, obviously it's going to be near to impossible down at this point in the fantasy season, given how crucial goaltending is. We all know this. But if you're looking at this from a dynasty perspective, I'm going to throw a few different, angles at you here, Steele, and we'll give you a who would you rather from that perspective as well, because, the soon-to-be 32-year-old Saskatoon native in Darcy Kuemper, and you have Bob, who's going to be 34 in September. So there's the age thing there, not too much of a gap, but age is age, especially for goalies. But what I do want to throw out there is we know Kuemper's battled injuries. That's a fact. But when he's in there, he's solid. But due to those injuries, he's got a lot less game mileage on him. Literally 300 less games played than Bobrovsky. Bob has been a solid goalie over the past number of years, but there's that mileage thing on there. So from a dynasty perspective, Steele, I would be looking at, hanging on to a guy like Kuemper, especially if he re-signs.
Yeah, it's definitely a great point to bring into the conversation, the age difference as well. For me, I was looking at the experience, like you said, like he's played 300 less games than Bobrovsky. I was also looking in playoffs, like Bobrovsky's played, I think, about 30 to 35 more games in the playoffs as well. So come down the stretch in the postseason, will that have some effect? We've seen over the last 4 years, the Colorado Avalanche have not been able to get past the second round. But again, like they're both outstanding goalies. And speaking just based off of fantasy, it's very tough. Obviously, if you can get one of these guys, you're going to be given a lot up to acquire one of either Bobrovsky or Darcy Kuemper.
Right.
I just like the way Bobrovsky plays a little bit better than Kuemper. And you mentioned the injury. With goalies, it's very, very scary. They're doing the splits all the time. They're going side to side, moving from the right to the left to the right. When a goalie gets injured, it is a little bit more scarier, I would say, than a defenseman or a player, because it's always dealing with their hamstrings and their quads, and that's what has affected Darcy Kuemper the last couple of injuries he's had. That being said, it's so close; it's hard to choose at this point. I'm leaning towards Sergei Bobrovsky.
I'll throw this out at you too, Steele, because I like the angle that I was looking at. I was cooking up. Huge shout outs to capfriendly.com. That is a great website, just a great resource in general. But looking at this from down the stretch, I wanted to revisit this because Kuemper has a lot to play for from a contract perspective.
Yes.
Bob is locked in at $10 million to 2026. Kuemper is a free agent at the end of this season. He's making $3 million this season. If he continues to be how his numbers have shown this season, and he can actually go on a run with Colorado and make a big payday, that's an angle that you can't deny here. That's an angle that potentially, too, could influence him over the next couple of seasons, as let's say he signs another short-term deal or even a 2-year deal or something like that. But I always look at contracts when it comes to goalies. That's an angle that he could be looking at down the stretch here for a guy who needs to – this is his last kick at a really big payday, Steele. So if he wants to get that money, he's going to have to really perform down the stretch for a Colorado team who, let's be honest, is the legitimate Stanley Cup favorite at this point in time. But if you have to put one question mark on them, Steele, it would be on Darcy Kuemper, I would have to say.
It's always on the goaltending. Like I mentioned, the last 3 years, it was always on Philip Grubauer. Grubauer goes down 1 year. Pavel Francouz comes in. He goes down as well. So the goaltending has been a little bit of an issue for the Colorado Avalanche in the postseason. I like your point right there, because if like you mentioned, he's turning 32 years old. He's looking for a big payday. They also have Nazem Kadri as well, who they're going to have to pay eventually. And if they're looking to acquire a guy like Claude Giroux, who we've talked about, they're going to have to juggle around some assets and move around some money to figure out what they're going to be doing. Obviously, if you're looking to go all in this year and go for the playoffs, all for it. But if you don't win this year, what happens leading into next season as well? So a lot of things are going to have to juggle around for the Colorado Avalanche. For the most part, they have been it's been done really well, with the contracts between the guys they have in their lineup right now. But it's going to start to we've seen it over the last couple of seasons where the young guys and guys are asking for big time money. And unfortunately, that's why Philip Grubauer wasn't able to stay. He wanted more money, and that's why he went to the Seattle Kraken and is getting paid $6.5 million right now.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, when it comes to these two guys, and Kuemper and Bobrovsky, if you have them this year, you're probably you're feeling it right now. But trying to acquire these guys, like we said, it's difficult. But to look at this from an overall perspective of who would you rather, I'm going with a guy like Kuemper for the short term and for the long term. I like Colorado's chances better this year for sure. I like the angle of the contract. So if you can, in my perspective, get your hands on a guy like Kuemper, go that way. Steele's feeling Bobrovsky. We're not agreeing today, and that's okay. But one thing we do agree on always, it's Built Bars. We know they're covered in 100% real chocolate, 100% real chocolate, and you got to get your hands on these low-calorie, high-protein, delicious treats. Replace your candy bars with these. They're just better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere between 200 and 300 calories. Go to Built.com, scroll down the macros chart. You'll be blown away. I've said it before. High protein, low cal, high fiber, low carb. Most Built bars contain 130 calories. What more do you need me to say? When you compare that to a candy bar, that usually has 240 calories. Now you understand what I'm saying. But hear more. What you want is the delicious flavors. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and new this month, I've said it before, I'll say it again, white chocolate, cookies and cream, Steele's new favorite. They're all delicious. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first and figure out how to make it healthy after that. I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. You've heard it before. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off. Thanks again, guys, so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Flip and Steele your first listen every single day. We say it a lot, but we really do appreciate all the love, the feedback. Make sure you hammer that subscribe button, hit the like button, share it out, tell your friends. We appreciate all the support, but make sure you check out Olympic Hockey Daily, presented by Locked On NHL. It's a bonus podcast covering all the action in Beijing. The gold medal games are coming up. You can find it on Locked On NHL podcast feed. It's free, available anywhere you get your podcasts. Whew. Steele. I'm gassed up, brother. It's a 4-game slate for Friday. I know it's a mini board, but that's okay. Hey, if there was one game out there, we'd find a way to feed you guys some picks. But 4-game board Friday, ahead of the big Saturday. We know this. Fridays can be a tricky spot to handicap from a DFS and betting perspective, but don't worry, we got you. Steele, Friday, hit me.
Hey, we said this on Wednesday as well. It was a 4-game schedule then, it's a 4-game schedule now, but I love all of these matchups here. The Nashville Predators versus the Carolina Hurricanes, the Florida Panthers versus the Minnesota Wild, where I have both Cam Talbot and Sergei Bobrovsky on my team, so that's going to be a huge matchup for me.
Interesting. The
Dallas Stars versus the Chicago Blackhawks, and then the LA Kings versus the Vegas Golden Knights. So all of these games for me are primetime games, juicy games where I can hammer on DFS and big-time bets. So I'm going with, and I say this all the time, but every single time I mention these guys' names, they absolutely go off big time and hit hard in all the games I've chosen them for. And it's the Dallas Stars top line. Every single time I go with them, they get big-time points. Rupe Hintz, Joe Pavelski.
Love your Rupe Hintz.
I love me some Rupe. It's actually funny because I was trying to trade him at the beginning of the season because he let me down last year. And then right when nobody wanted him in my league and right when I stopped asking, that's when he started going off and bearing goals, getting those big-time assists.
To be fair, he's also been hitting for you. You catch the anytime assist the other night, so we'll take that. Last night, personally, for the picks for myself, it was a little bit rough, but that's okay. We're bouncing back. But yeah, you got to keep going with the hot hand, Steele, and I already like where you're going, so please continue with your Dallas Stars angle here.
Well, the last time they played the Colorado Avalanche on Sunday, I believe. They won 4-0. Rupe Hintz had an assist in that game. Joe Pavelski had 4 points in that game, 2 goals, 2 assists, and Jason Robertson had 2 points in that Colorado game as well. So the top line has been absolutely clicking. I think it's a very easy argument to make that they're one of the best lines in the league, not just the top line, just any lines. I believe the NHL ranked them top. They're 11th out of they're the 11th best line in the league right now. I can make a case that they're probably top 10, maybe even top 7. Agreed. They've been one of the best lines. The chemistry has been absolutely unreal. And Robertson has been one of the most consistent players in the NHL over the last 2 years. He's only 22 years old, and he has 92 points in 93 games. So for me, the entire top line, not just Jason Robertson, has been clicking this entire season, been helping the Dallas Stars trying to push for that last playoff spot. And I believe they can do that against the Chicago Blackhawks, excuse me. So for me, the Chicago Blackhawks have been not a very difficult team to play against. They're very sporadic sometimes. Sometimes they can get 5+ goals. Sometimes they're just, not doing so well. So for me, I'm going with the Rupe Hintz top line. It's worked out for me every single time I've chosen them.
You can't fault the scenario too, right? Like if you see an advantageous scenario, sure, it's on the road, sure, it's the Chicago Blackhawks who can sometimes surprise you, but you got to
Yeah.
go with the overall trends. Does it pass the eye test? It doesn't. The Chicago Blackhawks don't look like a good hockey team. They aren't. Sure, they have Flower in there, but it looks like he's playing to go somewhere else. You can't put your finger on what's going on the blue line. Sure, they have some pieces up front. DeBrincat's nasty. Kirby Doc, the book's out on him, but there's some good pieces. But overall, these are the scenarios that you have to hammer from a DFS perspective. Where does it look advantageous? Dallas Stars starting to look better. Fighting for a playoff spot still. These are all things that you want on the side of the guys that you're selecting. So I think that there's some value there. We've talked about it before. I like Esa Lindell. I like Heiskanen. I like Klingberg. I like the fast puck moving defenseman that Dallas employs. I know, all three of those guys have had their ups and downs, but I think if you're looking to the blue line all night on Friday night, the value is there for the Dallas Stars for all the other reasons you mentioned for going up against the Blackhawks, but also because those are three quality defensemen who have, been pretty solid this season offensively.
Yeah, they've been great. And I think the big surprise, like you mentioned, was Esa Lindell. I don't think anyone really expected him to be that type of offensive presence, but he has been there a little bit for the Dallas Stars, especially on the PK as well. So I like Esa Lindell a lot. And you're going to get great value for him because of Miro Heiskanen and John Klingberg and the status they bring to the Dallas Stars. So a guy like Esa Lindell, he's going to be in the medium price range, probably $4,500. Not too expensive when you're comparing him to guys like Miro Heiskanen and John Klingberg as well.
100%, brother. And then, like we've said it a couple times already, it's a 4-game board. So slim pickings, but what else you got?
Oh, yeah. The next game I had, I did want to stay away from the Minnesota Wild Florida Panthers game. I think it's going to be very similar to that Carolina Hurricanes versus Florida Panthers game on Wednesday night. A low scoring game, but, obviously with the superstar talent they have up front, you never know what's possible. So the Wild Panthers game, I want to stay away from because I think it is going to be another low scoring game. So that's why I'm heading towards the LA Kings versus Vegas Golden Knights game. And I got to take a chance on my boy, Jack Eichel here. He got shut out in his Vegas debut. So for me, going up against this Kings team, I think it's going to be a little bit of a better matchup for the Vegas Golden Knights. I'm taking everybody on that top line: Jack Eichel, Max Pacioretty, and Evgeny Dadonov. I don't believe they're going to get shut out again. All three of those guys are on the top power play unit. I can also go with guys like Chandler Stevenson and Nicholas Roy. So those guys are not going to be super expensive. Chandler Stevenson has been a very underrated player for the Vegas Golden Knights. And then on the blue line, I like Brayden McNabb. He doesn't do a lot offensively. He's only got 2 goals, 10 points on the season. But this guy lays the body and gets in the lanes of shot every game, all day. Over 110 plus hits and block shots as well this entire season. So a guy like Brayden McNabb, he's not going to cost a lot, probably $3,000 at most, maybe $3,500 at most, actually. Right. But I just like I like what LT brings to the game besides, being a defenseman.
I really like that you highlighted the Eichel angle here because I talked about it with one of the picks of the night I had the last night. Or when I was saying that I think Eichel will have an impact. He obviously there's some rust to shake off, but I really like it now in his second game. I think that, without getting too much away again for the best bets of the night, don't want to go there yet, Steele. Well, I do, but not yet. I like this angle for Eichel. I like the spot for the Knights. And I think what you're getting at here is a spot also where the Knights are coming off back-to-back shutouts. They just got shut out in back-to-back games. So they're at home against the Kings. I like the matchup a lot better. They need to break out. They need to break out in a big way. Whenever I see a team get shut out in back-to-back games, circle that third game as a potentially breakout situation for the Vegas Golden Knights. I really hope that happens for all the guys that you just mentioned, Steele, and hopefully the listeners out there are, putting their monies down on what you just said, and it happens in a big, big way.
Yeah, well, the cap space has been working against them ever since they made this made this Jack Eichel trade. Mark Stone's out a long time on the IR. I just thinking about it, they're probably going to do what Tampa Bay did last season with Nikita Kucherov, just wait till the postseason and then just be $9 million over the cap hit. So the cap space has been absolutely detrimental towards the Vegas Golden Knights. But again, like you mentioned, they've been shut out in back-to-back games. Mm-hmm. I like this third game with Jack Eichel in that top line. I'm going to hammer it on the bets as well. And speaking of bets, BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before for football. But it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. Thank you so much for clicking the subscribe and follow button, Flip, and I appreciate all the support so much. So thank you for supporting us. We appreciate it all the time. And thank you for subscribing and following the channel. With that being said, it is now time. Big time bet, Flip. It's where the money's at. Flip, I'm not going to try to hype myself and boost myself up a little bit here, but I've been absolutely killing it.
You should.
With the big time bets, 3 for 3 Wednesday night.
Boom.
And 2 for 2 for our side bets, Flip. What do you think about that?
I'm starting to lag on the side bets. Overall, I'm still treading water. It's a long haul. Had a bad night the other night for me, for sure. It was a tough Wednesday. That's okay. Bounce back tonight. Hit the platforms for all the picks. We're keeping it rolling. Overall, we're both in we're in the black on the locks of the night. You especially. So if you're paying attention, we said it before. Hit us in the DMs. Hit us in the comments. Let us know where you're laying your money down. Let's talk. Let's chat. Friday's 4-game board. It's a little tricky, Steele. I'll be honest. It's a tricky one from a betting perspective. I talk about this a lot, but let's not tease anymore. I talked about it already. Golden Knights at home against the LA Kings. They've been shut out in back-to-back games. The Kings only have 3 wins in their last 10 against the Knights. You know where I'm at with these trends. Oh, yeah. The Knights are dealing with injuries to key pieces. Let's face it. Mark Stone, that's huge. Now Robin Lehner is out. That is also a factor that you cannot deny. But Laurent Brossoit has been decent in relief of Robin Lehner. I like this spot to have a little bit more time for Eichel to gel. They need a win, Steele. They need a win in a big way after 2 shutouts and a rough one, 2-0 against the Colorado Avalanche. I think this is still one of the tougher rinks to play in the NHL. LA is on the road, not a great road team. They need a big bounce back win. I like a spot for Eichel to maybe pop a point or 2 here. So I was looking at a player prop for Eichel because the odds are still going to be juicy. My first pick of the night, Knights on the money line, -150. I took them the other night and they burned me, gotten shut out, but that's okay. Back on the Knights money line, -150. What do you got?
I picked the exact same thing. Vegas Golden Knights on the money line. So we're on the same page there. I won't go into deep for this pick because you pretty much just explained everything. I think they need a big bounce back win. For me, my second pick of the night, it is that Panthers versus Wild game. I hit it on the money on Wednesday night in that Panthers Hurricane game, so I'm going back to it again. Panthers versus Wild under 6.5 at +105. Nice. Like I mentioned, it was a tight physical game Wednesday night between the Hurricanes and Panthers. The Wild got absolutely blown out 6-3 against the Winnipeg Jets as well. I think this is going to be a bounce back game for Cam Talbot going up against a huge Stanley Cup favorite in the Florida Panthers, as well as the Minnesota Wild being the team that they are. I think it's going to be under 6.5, a low scoring physical game. And I think Cam Talbot and Sergei Bobrovsky are going to prove why they're some of the best goalies in the league right now.
Wow. I'm liking that angle, Steele. I was staying away from that game until now. You sold me on it. You're up in the side bets right now. You're up in the lock of the Knights. That's okay. I'm here for it. As long as someone's feeding winners on a consistent basis, brother. Hey, this is a co-hosted show, so I'm going to come along for the ride all day long. And I think I'm going to have to come along for the ride on that pick because I like that angle a lot for everything that you said. 2 teams that I think are almost need to clean up on the defensive end. So you mentioned that. I
Yes.
like it a lot. I'll hit you with my lock of the night right now, Steele. I only have 2 picks, but my lock of the night is, you mentioned the Carolina Hurricanes, and I like this spot at home against the Nashville Predators. Not only do the recent trends in terms of these two teams, but overall the trends, I'm liking both of them to back the Hurricanes here on the money line, minus 160. The Predators are 5-15 over their last 20 when playing Carolina overall. And I'm sure if you look at it more closely, a lot of those games were when these teams were two different lineups. But the last 7 straight games in Carolina, Nashville has lost by 1 or 2 or more goals. Nashville has also just looked like garbage out of the All-Star break. They have allowed 14 goals while losing 3 straight. Carolina is one of the best home teams in the league, 16-4-2. They lost a really tight game against the Eastern Conference rival, the Florida Panthers, the other night in ugly fashion, blew a third period lead and lost in overtime. That's going to leave a sour taste in the mouth of one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, and I expect them to come out in a big way and lay a big beating on the Nashville Predators, who have not looked good after the All-Star break. Like I said, give me the Hurricanes on the money line, minus 160. That's Big Flip's lock of the night for Friday.
I like that pick a lot, Flip, and I would expect nothing less from the Carolina Hurricanes, especially in that tough loss to the Florida Panthers. Like you mentioned, lost that third period lead, losing overtime. They pretty much had it. They were pretty much controlling the entire game, but it was a very physical, very tight game between those two Eastern Conference juggernauts. So I like that pick. I might sprinkle some cash on there as well. For me, my last pick of the night is Joe Pavelski anytime goal versus the Chicago Blackhawks. Okay. I'm getting a little frisky here. I'm trying to test myself again, but the trend is just going in this direction. That top line, like I mentioned for DFS, has been absolutely lights out. Mm-hmm. Joe Pavelski has been filling the back of the net a lot recently. And again, those guys just seem to find each other and have eyes in the back of their head every single time they're on the ice, every single time they're on the power play, and every single time they're in the offensive zone. So for me, I'm going to test myself a little bit. Joe Pavelski, anytime goal versus Chicago Blackhawks. But the lock of the night for me is the Panthers versus Wild under 6.5 at plus 105. So lock it in right there, under 6.5 at plus 105. Flip's lock of the night is the Hurricanes on the money line at minus 160. I like those picks right there. I like all of the picks we mentioned. I think the Vegas Golden Knights is also a very easy pick right there. Money line at minus 160, a big bounce back game after being shut out twice. I'm not trying to jinx it. Hey, I can't jinx it. I've been on a roll.
Whoa.
I've been on a roll.
Whoa, he said it. All right. Don't
worry. I just knocked on wood.
Don't hit your head on the roof, gassing yourself up, bud.
I can't. I'm too short. I'm only 5'10", man. I ain't 6'7" like you. I don't have to duck under doorways. All right. There we go. Big time bets.
That's it, brother.
Big time bets with Flip and Steele. We're making the money. We're going to help you make the money as well. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. If you want more gambling advice and what you should pick every day, but not just for hockey, make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, it's hosted by your boy Q with insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms, just like this podcast right here. So please make sure you go subscribe and follow this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, as well as on YouTube, and you'll get the latest episode of Locked On Fantasy Hockey as soon as it's available each and every day. Like Flip said earlier, make sure you leave comments on the YouTube channel. Make sure you DM us on Twitter at Locked On Fantasy Hockey Show. We'll try to help you out with any trades, any questions you might have for us, any bets you want for the night. We'll try to message you back as soon as possible. Thank you again for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Have a great weekend as well. Good luck with all your bets, and we shall see you back here again on Monday.
Peace.